Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us for our latest event in the Newcastle Develop series. This month's event is obviously focusing on career breaks. My name is Jeremy Pigeon. I'm the Alumni Programs Manager here at Newcastle, and I'm sort of the advancement host bit. Taking a break from the workplace is becoming an ever more common phenomenon amongst employees for a variety of reasons. In fact, 1 in 6 of us will have to take a career break because of stress. And there are almost 2 million people in the UK in not paid employment because they're caring for a relative. So obviously diverse reasons for career breaks, not all of them positive. If you're considering taking a break, it's important to weigh the benefits against the risks of temporarily stepping off the career ladder. And I know that our panelists will discuss I don't want to say negative aspect, but the drawbacks and the considerations you have to do when thinking about taking a career break. And without any further ado, and with no more from me, I'm very happy to introduce our panelists for this evening, Laura Martinez, Joe Wheatley, and Peter McCleve, as well as our event host, Kay Jones. Kay is our Head of Work-Based Learning and Employer Partnerships here at Newcastle. And so without any further ado, Kay, over to you.
Thanks, Jeremy. You've said some of what I was going to say, so that's a really good start. I'm going to have to change what I was going to say, but welcome everybody, and thanks for joining us here tonight, and particular thanks to the panelists. As Jeremy said, people choose to take career breaks for many reasons, and today's panelists will give you some insight into their varied motivations. But we'll hear that different circumstances affect decision making, and that none of us have had the same experiences. My own experiences have been positive, and as my bio says, I've been lucky enough to be able to take not 1 but 2 career breaks that have naturally fallen about 10 years apart. And each time they've been to travel extensively. But to do so, I needed to be willing to take risks and to accept that there would be enormous uncertainty that I would need to face up to when the time came to return to work. But I genuinely believe that my career has been positively influenced by the choices I made. And I also believe that taking some time out has helped me to have a better perspective on life, work, and juggling the two. And I've worked in multiple roles in multiple sectors, from retail, recruitment and horse racing to marketing, catering and careers, partly influenced by the need to get a job when I came back from traveling. And it's taught me to be flexible and to focus on what I can do rather than what I can't. And then also to be really, really clear about what I want from work. So my current role of head of work-based learning and employer partnerships will actually soon be coming to an end. And I'm reinventing myself again, but this time as head of business strategy and innovation in our IT division. And without the career break experiences I've had, I don't think I would be as willing to embrace change and new opportunities as I am. So what I'm going to do now is to ask each of our panelists to introduce themselves and to tell you a little about their experiences of their career breaks. I'm going to start with Laura, move to Joe, and then finish with Peter. That should take us about 10 to 7. And we'll then move into Q&A and discussion. So I'll mute myself now, but Laura, over to you if you don't mind.
Thank you, Kay. And hi, everyone. My name is Laura Martinez. As you can see from my profile right there, I am currently a business manager and platform strategist at a company called BlackRock. My career break involved studying. So to give a bit more context, I was working in Finland for a bank called Handelsbanken. Did quite well there, but was feeling like I needed to explore other avenues a bit more. Decided that I wanted to do my MBA, and I ended up in Newcastle taking the year off, obviously, from work to pursue that degree. It says there that I took a year-long break, but eventually it ended up being almost 2 years altogether, considering the time that I spent post-graduation looking for that right next job for myself. So all in all, 2 years with the MBA included. And today, to echo what Kay said, I suspect I wouldn't be where I am today had I not had those 2 years off of the corporate ladder. And therefore, for me, my experience taking the career break was all positive, although it came with its challenges. So I'm happy to tell about that more, but that's me in a nutshell.
That's great, Laura. Thanks ever so much. So Joe, can I pass to you now, please?
Sure, yes. Hi, everybody. So I work in the finance world. I graduated from Newcastle in '96, and then I actually took 9 months traveling Australia at that point. But my main career break as such was in 2006. I'd met my partner, now husband, and we both had some funds saved up. The market was buoyant, jobs were aplenty, and we decided to go off traveling before really settling down to have a family. So we traveled around the world for 6-7 months before coming back and getting back into work. So that was our motivation really for having that break.
Thanks, Joe. And then Peter, last but not least.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. It's really nice to be back and re-engaging with the university. I graduated 3 years after Joe, I think, in 1999, and as she set out back then, the world seemed a little bit brighter, a little bit more optimistic, and I never left the university feeling like I won't be able to get a job. I also took a year out, went traveling around, and ended up doing a number of different jobs. Started my formal career in transport management. My degree was in physiology, so there was clearly a link between those two. And then after 5 years undergoing, doing work in the transport sector, decided I wanted to take a leap and move into finance. So I joined a bank in the city down on Fleet Street, and have continued my career in investment banking ever since. My career break was actually enforced 5 years ago on me. I wasn't planning on having one. I was hoping at some stage to take some time out to go and do some more traveling, but I was diagnosed with a blood cancer called myeloma. So my career break was an enforced one. I've spent three of the last 5 years undergoing chemotherapy. And although I am still under treatment today, I'm in a position where I can function. And I've taken a bit of a step away from my career, and I've started a campaign called 10,000 Donors, which gave me a focus during my time of recovery to do something positive. And I can talk a little bit more about the campaign a bit later on, but I think much of what the panelists are going to speak about this evening, much crosses over from forced and unenforced. And I suspect a lot of lessons can be hopefully translated into some of the decisions you guys might be considering making at the moment.
That's great. Thanks ever so much, Peter. So you can hear just how very different our panelists' motivations and experiences and needs have been in terms of taking a career break. And it shows very much that there isn't a one-size-fits-all approach. But as Peter said, there are absolutely still commonalities in terms of the experience, the decision-making process, and I guess the risk assessment that we need to take on. So what I'm going to do now is move on to some questions. And thank you so much to all of you that submitted questions in advance. There were loads of them, which was brilliant. And I know that some of them may already have been touched on in the information that our panelists have shared. But I am going to pick up some of them. Please do use the Q&A, as Jeremy said at the beginning, and we'll either reply to them in writing directly, or I'll pick them up and weave them into our conversation. I'm going to try and bring the questions to a close shortly before 7:30, because our panelists are going to share some top tips with you about considering a career break. I hope you've not forgotten that that's what you're meant to be doing. But the first question I'd like to ask, and I'm going to do this, Peter, to start with you if you don't mind, is how has your experience of taking a career break changed you?
It was difficult in that it was forced upon me. I think the problem I had from the outset of this was trying to navigate a diagnosis of cancer, trying to bring myself to understanding what that meant, trying to keep my family abreast and keep them afloat as well, and make sure the kids weren't overly influenced. But if there's one thing which I think has helped me to navigate to a stage where I'm at today, it was having something of substance to help focus my mind. I think a lot of the time when it comes to career breaks, we're worried about what we're going to get through at the very end, what we're coming back to, and sometimes missing the whole point of considering a career break, which is what are we going to enjoy in the interim. And we're always setting this goal for the future. For me, so much control was taken away from me in my situation. All of a sudden, I couldn't look towards retirement because my prognosis was 7 years. I'm not going to see my pension. And I had to consider many, many other things. But that didn't mean life was over. And it took me a number of months to get through a very, very emotionally challenging time, having to understand what chemotherapy was all about, accepting that I'm not going to be able to see retirement. These are all things which are forced upon you, they're out of your control. But for me personally, identifying those things within my control was massively important. and finding a way to let go of those things that I couldn't deal with. And I guess in any walk of life, whether you are considering a career break because you want to or because you have to, focusing your energy on the things in your control gives you some semblance of purpose and focus. And for me, that was crucial, absolutely crucial. I don't let go of things very easily. If you spoke to my wife, she would attest to that. But finding a way to do so, realizing that you can't influence everything. You can't look forward 12 months' time to what the job market's going to look like. Who could have forecast COVID and then what we're seeing in Ukraine? You can't. But what you can do is plan for what is just in your immediate future and do all you can to influence that. And so for me personally, I guess if I was going to directly answer the question and bring this to a close, it's identifies those things in your control, really, do something purposeful with it that you want to do. Life is more than just a career. It's easy for me to say, at the age of 44, and the younger me, when I was 21 and graduating, didn't think the same way. And I probably wouldn't be listening to my advice either. But I will say at the age of 44, yes, career is important, but it's not the be all and end all. And when you're sitting on your rocking chair on the porch, when you've retired at whatever the government age of retirement will be when we all get to that stage, you don't want to be looking back with, we'll all have regrets, but it'd be nice to know that you made those choices that were for the best of you. And, sometimes it's easy not to take, not to take the risk and not push yourself. And it's even harder when you've got kids. And it's even harder still the older you get, because you're very aware of what life has to throw at you. But, when you're younger, recognize what's in your control, recognize that there is more influence, there's more things coming down the line, and just take ownership of your situation, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Just own it and do as much as you can at the time.
I think that's fantastic advice about all aspects of our lives, because we do get one shot at this. And clearly your circumstances have been incredibly trying and continue to be really, really difficult for you. But I think it's absolutely critical advice, and we are more than a career and a salary and a job title. And I absolutely couldn't agree more that we need to control what we can, and we need to make choices based on the round, the whole. So I think that's excellent advice. Joe, same question to you. How's your experience of taking a career break changed you?
I would say more rounded, confident individual, all the experiences of just organizing that break and almost taking the leap of faith that, it was daunting giving up my job. I haven't, I can't say it wasn't, but as a qualified, I think I had the luxury of having been a qualified accountant. So I kind of knew deep down I could get a job wherever when I came back. It might not be my job of my dreams, but I could work, I could earn an income. And it's all about, I suppose it makes you reevaluate, like, reiterating what Peter said there and yourself, you reevaluate what's important, why you're never going to lie in your grave thinking, I wish I'd spent 5 more hours slogging my guts out at the office. No one's going to thank you for that at the end of the day, and I think time is precious, life is for living, and I think go and experience it. I'll be totally honest, I don't know if I could do it now at 45, but when I was 30, when I did it, I didn't have the family commitment, so that was a perfect opportunity to just go. I didn't have that worry, so I kind of think it's just about taking that risk, but a calculated risk nonetheless. Not just.
I think that point about calculated risk is really important, isn't it? Because we can't all do it. It's not possible to do it always. If we've got financial commitments, if we've got family commitments, whatever they may be, it might actually not be conducive for us to do so. So calculated risk, I think, is a really, really important point. And your sentiment, life's for living, is absolutely and completely true as well. Laura, I'm going to ask. Oh, sorry, go on, Jo.
No. I was just going to add. And I've never come across, I've had many jobs, and I've never once been sort of, why did you have that time off? They've never ever looked at that, in my experience, as a negative. It's always been a positive, because it's another sort of string to your bow, if you like.
Well, hold that thought, because I'm going to come back and ask some more questions about that later, actually, because it was one of the themes that came up in the pre-submitted questions around how do you sell that, how do you justify the gap. So I would like to pick that back up again in a bit, if you don't mind, because I would echo that experience. But Laura, same question to you, is around how taking a career break has changed you.
Well, my career break was at a time when I was in my mid-20s. So I was younger and inexperienced, and I guess didn't have that life experience that I could maybe now have, or what I have accumulated. So in my mid-20s, I guess the risk of taking a career break, going and studying, and then leaving a permanent job role elsewhere was mainly a financial risk. And how am I going to support myself, not having accumulated enough finances to support myself? So basically it was pack everything in a bag and try and sell everything that I own to accumulate that pot of cash that would carry me through as I did my MBA degree in Newcastle. But definitely what I've learned, I guess, from the time both when I did my MBA, but the year after, when I looked for that next opportunity for my career. And at times, I must admit, it was incredibly challenging, because no one likes to jump from one interview to another and try and convince people that you're the person to hire. So eventually, I think the time away, the couple of years that I had off, gave me a lot of perspective, and it's helped me tell my story in a very practical way whenever I am in front of other people, whether that's interviewing or I'm interviewing others. It gives me a lot of insight into other people's day-to-day if they've had a career break, although it might be different to my experience as taking a career break. And I guess another bit that I've definitely taken away from my career break, specifically focusing on the second year when I had to look for work, and it was challenging. It's always challenging, no matter what the market is. So I guess resilience is something that I took away from that. I guess anyone who's taken a career break can attest to that. That it gives you some element of resilience and patience. You have to take everything with a pinch of salt. You know that at the end of the day, hopefully things will work itself out, and if not, you will find another way. So staying optimistic and patient with yourself, specifically when you're having a break, those are the things that I took away from my time off.
That's great. Thanks ever so much. So as I said before, when Joe was talking about kind of the actually having a career break was often as a benefit, or perceived as a benefit when interviewing, we've had a question that's come in from Simon around sort of how future employers will view career breaks. But there was a recurring theme from the pre-submitted questions, and it was around employer perceptions of career breaks. So several people were asking how a career break and the motivations for taking one can be explained to potential new employers without putting them off. And if you think there's more acceptance of career breaks as a result of the pandemic. So Joe, I'm going to come back to you, because you mentioned it before. You were saying there that you didn't think it had been detrimental to you when looking. Can you expand on that a bit?
Yeah, so, having gone for interviews at a number of different sectors, if you like, I've never once been if they're going through your CV, or they'll say, talk me through your CV, I'll be honest and say, it's on my CV as a 7-month career break for round the world travel, and they're all more interested. Every interviewer has asked me, oh, that's interesting, where did you go, what did you do? And I said, what were your reasons for going? And I said, we just wanted to do it before starting family, just being absolutely transparent with people. And everyone's more interested in where I've been and what I got up to than actually, oh, why did you do that? You shouldn't have done that. There's never been that. And I think it just broadens your horizons as well. And it makes you, as I say, it just gives you more depth as a person, I think. And it shows some sort of character as well, that you're willing to give up your job and take the leap of faith, and what will be, at the end of the day. So I from a personal point of view, I've never had any negativity whatsoever. And I do think with what's gone on in the last couple of years with the pandemic, businesses' eyes have been more opened about that life-work balance, and people can work from home. You get more productivity now with people being genuinely perhaps happier with a work-life balance split or hybrid working. So I do think it's definitely a step in the right direction, just generally across businesses.
So more envy about your travel rather than any concern
Yeah,
about it. That's
yeah,
interesting.
definitely.
Yeah.
I definitely got that from interviews and all different levels throughout my career, you know, from a junior finance person right up to finance director, you know, that there's never been any sort of, that's interesting. You know, it's always been a positive response about a jealous response, honestly.
I was concerned when I took my second, when that was on my CV, if I thought, actually, you know, she's showing a pattern that this is, you know, is she going to disappear again if we give her the job? And so that did give me some pause for thought around, would it make me appear flaky, for example? But you know, the question I asked all of you first was around, has taking a career break changed you? I think in terms of answering Simon's question and some of the others that came through around how do you almost sell this to an employer, it is about the resilience that Laura talked about. It's around the life skills, the cultural perspectives, the experiences and how we're growing and gaining from them, whatever they may be. So I think there's a story to tell should somebody want to probe that in interview. And my experience has been that actually I've either been asked where I travelled to, or it's never even been mentioned. It just hasn't been. It hasn't been an issue whatsoever. Laura, have you got anything you'd like to add to that point in terms of kind of the selling it to an employer?
Well, I personally think that obviously I agree with the transparency. It's always good to say, why did you take the career break? If you don't even really have a reason, you wanted to take time for yourself, it's okay to say that as well. Like there's nothing wrong about that. And that was actually something that I used for the first few months when I started looking for work, because after graduation, I went back home to Finland. I did take some time for myself. I didn't start applying for jobs straight away. So it was a few months in before I actually started getting any interviews. And even at that point, people started asking, so what's this career break? You've been out of the job market for a while. I just told them I took time for myself. Yeah. I've been from school to school to job to from job to job and now back to school, and I deserved a break. And no one had anything to add to that. So it's like you're telling your current boss that you want to go on a holiday. Who's going to question that? No one. You deserve your holiday, so you deserve your break.
I think that's an excellent point. And in Jeremy's introduction, he talked about the number of people who are taking breaks because of stress. And I think that there's much more positive narrative and much more openness around mental health issues than there ever has been before. And I mean, there's still a long way to go, clearly. But it is more okay than ever before to be able to be honest and upfront about it. And long may that continue. I think that can only be a positive approach. Thank you both. Peter, is there anything you'd like to add to that topic at the minute?
Yeah, echo the points made about honesty. I mean, having been on the hiring side as well as the interviewee side as well. It's amazing how things have changed. And the one thing I would say, there's always going to be a risk to this, right? Whether we like it or not. I think being honest is the best thing. But some employers will, whether you like it or not, judge you on that, and some might judge positively. I suspect more will positively than not. But the risk is there that someone doesn't judge you. The question you then got to ask yourself, because an interview is a two-way sales process. It's never just one way. It's not just you selling your soul to whomever. It's the business selling themselves to you. Do you really want to work for a company or a person who doesn't value the same things that you value? I know certainly when you first come out of your, wherever you come from, it's GCSEs, A-levels, degrees, whatever stage you enter the job market, and when you're younger, you're desperate to make that impression. You're desperate to almost bend over backwards so you get that higher. But I think, and again, easy to come from someone who's been through so many interviews now, I've just forgotten. But I would say if you are having to oversell yourself and you're really having to say and do things that you don't feel comfortable with, the chances are after a period of time, once the 18-month honeymoon period has started, that you'll probably want to look to move on. And I've had that hiring people, you've had an honest conversation, exit interview, and they say, just didn't work for me. And yet when you interviewed them, they couldn't have been any more effusive about what they wanted. So I'd say being honest is absolutely the right thing. And remember, if you don't feel that it's the right fit for you, it's okay to walk away. Not getting that job is not the end of the world. There will be other opportunities, whether it's with a big, global corporate or the small shop round the corner. There are so many different career paths to take. So be confident in who you are and what you've got to sell, because it's a two-way thing. And, do think twice about just accepting the first job just because you've been given a job offer.
I couldn't agree more with that. In fact, I've got a wry smile because it sounded like words that often come out in my mouth. I do quite a lot of mentoring and coaching. And one of the things I try and help people do is in thinking about their next career steps, And I so often remind people that it is a two-way process. It is not about you being pathetically grateful for what it is that someone may proffer to you. It really is about you assessing whether or not it's right for you. And of course, we're driven by the need to pay our bills. I completely understand that. But we can be more discerning, and it's incredibly important we align our values and our commitments and desires with an organisation. So I did have a wry smile when you were saying that, because it feels like something I just say, very frequently, but passionately believe in. So thank you, everyone. That was really helpful. We've had an interesting question from Rumana saying everyone taking a career break seems young. So thank you for that. If you're talking about us, I'm delighted that that's what you're seeing. But you ask, would they do it later in life? And if not, why not? So I had my first one at 30 and my second at 40. And actually we were doing a bit of a sort of pre-meet before this session started. And one of the things I joked about was, because I had 10 years between my first two career breaks, that I'm kind of getting on for needing my next one. But I did say to Jeremy before that actually I do think it's riskier the older you get. Yes, there's employment legislation that ensures that age discrimination is not acceptable. However, I would be more cautious at approaching 48, considering taking another career break, because I think it may be a little harder for me to return to the level I'm currently at. Now, that doesn't mean that you have to consider returning to the level you're currently operating at. That's part of the risk profile and decision making. And I suppose for anyone considering a break for whatever reason, we all have to weigh up the pros and the cons and the risks related to our own situation. But I'm going to take it as a compliment that you were saying that we were all young. So thank you for that. Peter, I've got a question that I'd like you to pick up, if you don't mind. Mm-hmm. And it came as one of the pre-submitted ones, but it was, what's your advice for someone taking a career break because they've lost the passion for what they do?
If going to work day in day out is purgatory, is that the way you want to spend your life? I mean, I got to the stage where I was so sick of going to work in the transport sector that I knew I needed, for my own sanity, to make that change. I needed to jump. So if you've lost the passion for something, unless you can reignite it in another sphere of the same industry, because if you're looking at gradiating the risk as you consider making the jump, the grass isn't always greener. That's obvious. I don't want to use cliches, but just going from transport to banking was never a guarantee that it was going to be, a raging success. And there are things about investment banking which do not float my boat at all. But if you've lost the passion for something, then I would say take the steps to make a change, to do something different. You've got one crack at this, and it doesn't matter if you are 20 years old or 44. I can only speak to the age I'm at. I mean, I might think something very different at the age of 60, but even now, if I disliked my job that much, that I was not enjoying my life, that it was creeping over into my family life, my personal life, well, I personally would own that, and I would make the change. It wouldn't matter how far down my career I really was. And sometimes it's unpalatable. What are the other risks that come along with this? So if you're pulling a 6-figure salary because you spent 25 years in one industry and you've done really, really well, but you hate it, well, quite possibly you may need to take a pay cut. You might need to cut back on some of the nicer things in life. But again, your life, the day-to-day, what you are living, has equal value, if not more, as your career. And I wouldn't worry too much about explaining it to other people. At the end of the day, you've got to explain it to yourself. And for me personally, when I knew I was a miserable sod to be around, to be quite honest, I was not enjoying my work at all. And I had to make that change for my then girlfriend, now wife, and for my own sanity as well. I think it's too easy sometimes to live in fear of not making those changes. And you've got to be bold. It's easy to say, not so easy to do. But having made that career jump myself, I have no regrets, despite the frustrations that come along with my existing career, and even despite the frustrations I have with my current enforced career break, if you want. I would rather make the change than sit and coast through life and then get to the end of it and go, wow, I can't change that now. I can't change it.
It's better to regret doing something and it not working out than to regret not doing it in the first place, I think. Yeah, I'd always rather try. And I think you're absolutely right to say own the reality of your situation. Laura, anything you'd like to add to that point?
I like the what Peter said about making a plan. Having a contingency plan is essentially to the change that you're wanting to make. And I personally, the word change carries connotations. I'm not sure if it goes down well when you tell someone that you're making a change, because it always feels like this massive, huge thing. So the way I think about it is whatever you're doing, all of the skills and the experience that you've accumulated, those are all transferable. So rather than making a change, you're actually just pivoting. You're taking a detour to something else that matches your existing skill set, and you're applying it elsewhere. And therefore, if you stop calling it a change and you've lost your passion, pivot. That's what I called it. I pivoted. I didn't want to go to the role that I did before my MBA, so I resigned. I took a career break. I studied. I expanded my knowledge and skill set, and then I pivoted to what I do today. So yeah, rather than calling it a change and having that maybe negative connotation with it, focus on the pivoting. And also, I guess a practical advice that I would give is think about someone close to you. If they were to come to you, whether they are your mother, your sister, your brother, your uncle, your best friend, and they came to you and told you that they have lost passion to their work, would you tell them to pivot? You probably would. So do yourself a favor and tell yourself the same thing.
Great advice, thank you. Jo, anything you'd like to add to that?
I don't think so. I think everything's been covered. I do think, do you want to go every day on the sort of treadmill of I hate what I'm doing? It's a long day if you hate what you're doing, and there's plenty more different opportunities out there. It's taking that step and being brave, I guess, but weighing up the risks, but you could get a lot of reward from doing it.
Great, thank you. So another theme that came up in the questions was the challenging issue of health, and there were several comments which we've touched on a little already relating to stress. What's stress? Sorry, I'll put my teeth back in. Stress and other health issues as a motivator for taking time out. So people were talking about the need to then reassess their priorities, with financial gain being less of a driver than happiness and well-being. We've just touched on some of it. I mean, it certainly resonates with me, not specifically because of stress, but more a realization that work is really just one small part of our lives, and that we do have to be in control of our own destinies in as far as we can. So I think that the points that the panelists have just made there around thinking about the positives, about the change that you're affecting, the pivot rather than the change being the driver, but understanding that if you are miserable, if you are unhappy, if you are stressed, if your work is making you miserable, you owe it to yourselves to find a different path. One of the questions that came up in the Q&A just now that I'm looking at is Jackie's talking about, no one having mentioned so far, time off to start a family, look after a family, look after aging or ill parents, and how that can be juggled. Now, we've talked about our motivations for taking career breaks, which are a little different to that. But I suppose if it is enforced in the way that Peter's has been, and the way that Laura's yours was for a period of time, the financial pressure must feel particularly worrying. So Jo and I were in quite different situations with our career breaks, but I think it might be quite interesting, Laura and Peter, if you don't mind coming in on this one, to talk around how you dealt with, without prying, obviously, and with that stress and pressure related to the reality of the financial situation you found yourself in. So Peter, do you want to take that one first?
Yeah, this is currently it's a daily challenge for us. When we've got to the stage now where we've turned the heating off, since I've been out of work full time, thankfully we had there was work. There was an insurance policy basically which helped to pay a proportion of my salary, but not the whole thing. And it was, we made, if you want, we did what many people do. You sort of live to your means, even when you get a pay rise, you suddenly find that money disappears. And we were in that same situation. So when the pay drop came in, it's been for the last few years very, very difficult. And it's awful being at the whim, because I can't go out and, earn any more money. That's just the way it is. That's part and parcel where we are. So, like we have got to the stage where heating is off. It's too expensive. We can't do it. And it's awful with two, when you've got two kids here, but that's kind of where we are. And it is stressful. I think I've I often, because I tend to look after the financial element of our relationship and try and shield Jen and the kids from that as much as possible. And so it's carrying an extra pressure there. But it's something which it's a stress, it's there, but you've got to almost step up and own it. What can you do? You've got to cut down on outgoings. You can't go for, coffees and meals like you used to. Maybe you can't go on holidays all the time like you used to. And that's absolutely fine. You know what I mean? As long as you soon realize that a lot of the things that you were spending your money on, actually they were frivolous and they weren't necessary. And so you find a way. We've always said, if the worst case, and we're very, very privileged with the situation we're in that we have a home we could sell. And if we had to do that, then we would do that. These are the big decisions that you end up having to make. And if you've got, an aging or an ill parent or something like that, it's another dynamic completely. It's someone else's responsibility for you. But from our perspective specifically, again, it comes back to what I said at the very beginning about taking responsibility and owning your situation. I'd worked, like many people, very, very hard to get us to a stage where we had a home to live in. But nothing is permanent. Nothing is steady and stable forever. And so if we have to make those tough choices, we'll make those tough choices. That's just the way it is.
I mean, I think that's all incredibly important. If we think about the awful situation in Ukraine at the moment and many other parts of the world where horrific things are happening, I mean, nothing shows more, does it, that everything is completely precarious. So I suppose, yes, it goes back to that message of accepting the reality of the situation, whether it is caring for parents or whatever it may be, and owning what you can and working through the circumstances you find yourself in. Thanks, Peter. Laura, anything you'd like to add to that, given your experiences?
I suppose the one thing is we've all been young, we've all been in situations where money has at one point been tight. And if you think back to that moment, whether you're planning to take time off to start a family, whether you are forced to take a career break for whatever reason, think about back to the time when you didn't have a lot of money and how did you manage then? And think about how most of the things maybe today, if you're earning good money, you're able to buy nice things. Those are all luxuries. Those are not really needed. So think about what is it that you really need to get by and start from there. And then you realize you are able to cut down cost. You're able to make plans on how to save more money and be more frugal, plan ahead. I personally, when I was working in Finland, I made the decision to invest a bit of my monthly salary into an unemployment insurance. I know that's not a thing in every country, but it was something that I did. Gave me a peace of mind. If one day I happened to be unemployed, I'd get a certain percentage of my monthly salary paid to my account, and that will get me by. So there are many ways that you can plan ahead, and there are many ways that you can cut down costs. But if you look back to a time when you were maybe younger, you were a student and you were living on a very tight budget, you'll be able to do it today if you were able to do it once.
That again's made me laugh. When we first took our first career break, which was back in 2005, my husband had only just moved into the house I owned, but I'd always been completely in charge of all of my own finances and then our joint finances. And when we went traveling, although we'd had some money saved up, we were by no means flush. So it went from me being able to buy pretty much what I wanted to basically saying, can we afford to buy this cup of coffee? And I need a new bottle of shampoo. Can we do it? And we had this little red book. And we used to write down every single purchase we made, including, for 50 Thai baht or whatever it may be. And it really taught me, Laura, that I did not need stuff. And it's actually, that stayed with me. I'm incredibly unmaterialistic still. And I absolutely put that down to having to economize in order to be able to extend our period of travel. So you're absolutely right. We don't need a new pair of shoes. We don't need a new outfit, really. Most of the time, it becomes a habit that we fall into. So yes, I think we can cut our cloth to suit our means if we need to do so. So I think that's great advice. Thank you. I'm going to move on. Sorry, yeah, go. Sorry.
Just popped into my head. It's also it comes through the way in which we're pushed through school, I think. But societally, I think we tend to view things as we have to keep going up and striving for more and more. And actually taking a career break, we're speaking about this as if it's a negative thing and how we've got to somehow justify it to people. And actually taking a step backwards, or what, it's the wrong term. It's not always negative. You don't have to be aiming for CEO for your entire career. You know, it's actually getting to a stage, moving side, lateral move, maybe a move away from the upper echelons of management is absolutely fine. And redefining this in our brains is huge. I think when we start to frame what we're actually looking to do, it's our career and our life. Our life will continue to move forwards. Time doesn't stop. You know, that's always moving forwards. But just because you go from VP to associate to career break to parent, it's fine. It's absolutely fine. And go back to what I said before, if you've got to convince someone that what you did, which was the best for you at the time, and they're not seeing that, do you want to be reporting into those people every day?
Yeah, excellent point. And you're completely right about the culture that we are brought up to follow, the keeping up with the Joneses. I don't care how I'm judged in terms of my status, my job title, or my salary by anybody. It's about what makes me happy and what's important to me. So I think there is a confidence that perhaps comes a little as we age, in terms of not feeling the need to justify our existence to others. I mean, I drive an old banger. I could afford to buy a new car, but I don't care as long as it turns on when I need it to turn on. I literally don't care. So yes, we do find sometimes the keeping up with the Joneses, the progressing to that next job, is more to validate ourselves in other people's eyes. So it's really interesting to consider, is it really what we want? So I think that they're all excellent points. Thank you. A chat question that's come up, but also one that was a pre-submitted question, which may be from the same person, is around normalizing a career break when surrounded by friends and family who think you're lazy or throwing your career away. I mean, I think this is a great question. It links back to what we were just talking about then, about don't worry about what other people think, make your decisions for you. But Laura, do you have any views on how one might normalize a career break, or how one might justify, is justify the right word, convince friends or family who are perhaps more entrenched in our Western culture, in our progression at all times? How might you advise our listeners to, I suppose, explain their motivations?
I think this comes back to what Peter's alluded a couple of times now. I know it's challenging whenever it's the people closest to you that aren't really seeing eye to eye with you. And in a topic like this, because it carries traditionally a negative vibe attached to it, it can be quite challenging. And I can obviously speak only from my own experience, but when I was unemployed and obviously looking for work, just being unemployed carried that sort of, you're unemployed, that's not good. Explaining that to people was quite challenging, but then again, I've been very privileged to have an incredibly supportive family, incredibly supportive friends, and whatever I've put my mind to, they have been there and have supported me. So I suppose it's really hard for me to even imagine I don't know, my parents coming to me and telling me that you shouldn't take a career break. But thinking it from a very practical point of view, and I guess from a female point of view, if I one day were to be pregnant and I needed to take time off to be on maternity leave, no one would question that, would they? It's a standard thing. Parental leave, maternity leave, whatever it is, it's taken for granted. Yes, of course you'll have your maternity leave. Why not? You're giving birth, so obviously you're going to do that. So why not apply that to the rest of the career breaks?
Right.
It's a challenge, but maybe if you give that practical example to your family or whoever is not really seeing eye to eye with you, why does not that carry forward to the other career breaks?
I actually used exactly that strategy. So I don't have children. And when I first told my parents that I was going to give up my good job, as was my husband, and we were going to go off traveling. They were panic stricken. They thought my life was ending. They thought I was sealing my fate. They thought it was the worst possible decision. And I said exactly that to them. You would not react in that way if I told you I was about to go off on maternity leave. And actually they embraced it in time, and they were supportive. And I think they just raised an eyebrow when I did it a second time. But it was quite a challenge for me. My friends, I wasn't challenged by. They were all incredibly supportive. But yeah, my parents, who were, obviously a different generation to me, certainly found that more challenging to get their heads around. Jo, same question to you. How do you normalise it with negative influences?
I mean, my parents were supportive as well. I think they were a bit shocked that when we were handing our notices in, with good jobs, and it was a bit like, oh my goodness, how on earth, you'll never get another job, what are you going to do, but again, it was accepted, and I didn't come across too much negativity, to be honest. Even my employer said kind of, oh, I wish I'd done that, and I think maybe it wasn't so common 15 years ago, but 15, 16 years ago. But I think now, in the last few years, I definitely think employers are, and rightly so, are changing their attitudes. And as Peter's alluded as well, said, do you want to work for a company who frowns upon it? I wouldn't want to work, luckily I've been accepted. And, even when I handed my notice in to go traveling, when I came back, they even said, if you're at a loose end, can you come back and help us with year end? And I did actually, I went back for about 3 or 4 months. I didn't want to go back there because it was quite a stressful job, but it helped me out, and it helped them out as well. So it was a good situation to be in. But I didn't come across it was my parents really that were only like, oh, you've handed your notice in, but other than that, it was fine.
Great, thank you. I'm not going to pick up all of the questions on the Q&A, and I think that some of them have already been answered as part of some of what we've discussed so far. But one of the questions that I would like to pick up, and I think probably, Peter, this is your time to talk about your work that you're doing now with your campaign. Jackie Carr's asking if any of us have done voluntary work for a change, people less fortunate. And I think, Jackie, you've heard from us about what we have been doing, but actually Peter, I think, has got some really interesting information to share about his campaign. So perhaps you could talk about that at this point, if that's okay.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, like I said, from at the top, my career break was enforced, and it would be disingenuous of me to say that I was doing every single weekend, work down the soup kitchen, for example. I wasn't, I contributed to charity, but I certainly wasn't as active as I have been. And being able to build something of my own, to have the courage to, well, not the courage, but I hadn't had the courage prior to being forced to do so. I've always had grand designs on being an entrepreneur, but I'd spent so many years in the world of permanent employment that I sort of I'd take myself to the precipice and never jump over. And yet when I was given my diagnosis, I had no choice. And it's amazing what you can achieve. And thankfully, what a small idea was grown into something of substance now, something I'm very proud of. And as much as I've enjoyed my career, I have taken more out of the last 3 years of setting up my campaign, 10,000 donors, to the detriment possibly of my future employers, because I'm so used to being my own boss now that I fear that being able to make decisions around operations, sales, marketing, all these sorts of things, I like being in control of that. And I wonder if I'd be a nightmare employee now. I hope not. But anyway, so anyway, I set up 10,000 donors to right what I saw as a very fixable wrong. With my diagnosis, I was given a 7-year prognosis, and that was 5 years ago. So I'm at the pointy end of that now, but I'm still feeling all right, and I don't believe it. And I think because I don't believe it, it allows me to stay focused and positive. The prognosis I have, there is every chance of extending it, however long that might be, if I can find myself a stem cell donor. And you can register to be a stem cell donor through a simple cheek swab. Super, super simple. Costs you nothing. If you go to 10,000.com, yeah, it walks you through the whole thing wherever you are in the world. Now, it's about finding genetic twins. And as I started to dig into this, again, it comes back to what's in my control, what's out of my control. I can't do anything about having any curable cancer. What I can do is improve the odds about helping not just myself, but other people in a similar situation. And at the moment, there's only 2% of the world's of the UK population, on the stem cell donor registry. And if you are white European, you've got at best a 60% chance of finding your match. If you're any other minority ethnic designation, you've got at best 20%. It's a real health imbalance. And although I look white Caucasian, my background is actually Macanese, Chinese, Portuguese. And this is where I have a problem. The reason I've not got my stem cell donor match is because of my mixed genetic heritage. That to me was in my control. At the very least, I could improve the odds. And so what I do now is I run presentations, do projects, I write articles, raising awareness of stem cell registration and the simplicity of how people right now can save lives by doing nothing more than a simple cheek swab. It's given me a focus. It's given me a focus which has helped to make a difference. You know, as part of the campaign I've been running, we've had, originally our target was 10,000 people. We've had nearly 100,000 people register, and 17 of those have gone on to donate their stem cells and save someone's life. And, you know, don't get me wrong, I love my career in finance, but I was never smart enough to join the medical school at Newcastle. But I've been able to do something which has, you know, through a lot of support and help of other people, has allowed me to say, you know what, I've helped to change the lives of other people. And that is quite a wonderful thing to be able to contemplate. So whereas I often found myself career-wise feeling a bit like a square peg in a round hole, trying to squeeze myself into a career and find a path, I never quite found it. But this is something which I've helped to build and grow. It was an idea which was born out of necessity, but it's delivered so much more than even I ever thought possible. And I'm super proud of it. So, you know, how does that translate to what you guys are trying to understand today? It's what's in your control. I keep saying the same sorts of things, but it's also what you believe in. It's finding that thing. And you know what? Truthfully, you may never, ever find your purpose and focus in a career. I'll be quite honest with you. My experience is I tried transport, I tried investment banking. I enjoyed some of it. I disliked some of it as well. But there are things you can do that aren't driven by money all the time, that can deliver so much more purpose and allow you, earn your money over there, but maybe you can expend your time doing something else over here. And it just makes life that little bit more interesting and enjoyable. And it gets me out of the bed every morning. You know, I've got 2 kids that do the same thing, but it's nice to know that, you know, so many crazy things have happened since I set up the campaign. I mean, I ended up on bloody Saturday night takeaway last weekend. Didn't expect that. That was completely off the scale. So would that have happened to me if I had not started 10,000 donors? Absolutely not. And would I've learned so much and met so many cool people along the way? No way. I mean, whatever happens to me now, I've done so many more interesting things in the last 5 years since diagnosis than maybe I'd done before. And I'm not, grateful is the wrong term, but I've been able to achieve more because of my diagnosis since it all came about. And I'm taking too much time. I apologize, but yeah,
no, not at all. I wanted to come to you. I specifically wanted you to share information about 10,000 donors. But what I think would be great, Peter, as well, is if you could pop the link into the chat as well, so that people can see, because I think everybody listening today should commit to at least having a look at the campaign. I have registered as a stem cell donor. I did it years ago, and it's incredibly easy. So if everybody could really take seriously this sort of call to action today, I think that would be helpful. Now, we've got 3 minutes to go. Jeremy's just messaged me to say that we are. And actually, we've naturally come to probably where I wanted us to get to, because some of the other questions that we haven't yet answered are really quite specific. And I'm hoping that some of the more generic aspects of them, like building confidence, like thinking about employers being more understanding about the COVID, about career breaks since COVID, I hope that we've touched on throughout the questions that we've addressed so far. As a really quick fire round robin, I want top tip from each of you about career breaks. Jo, top tip, go.
Top tip, I would say, because I'm in finance, I would say cover the financial side of things. You know, have you got savings to cover your fixed costs if you're away or you know, not working? Have you thought about a mortgage holiday option? Have you got sufficient funds to enjoy your time off, not worrying all the time that you're off? And also covering time that you're unemployed when you do return from your career break? You know, have you tried to at least cushion some of that, I would say?
Great, thank you. Laura, same question to you. Top tip, please.
Careers are extremely long. So whether you take a year, 2 years, 6 months, it's percentage-wise, it's an incredibly small part of your entire career. So it's a very long journey, and therefore my top tip is, I heard this from an investor who I work with, so kudos to them. But basically, whenever a new president in the US is selected, they notoriously take 100 days at the start of their presidency. So basically, my top tip is to, when returning to work after a career break, allow yourself a presidential 100 days to get back your groove.
Love it, love it, love it, love it. Peter, top tip, please.
Yeah, I'd written 3 things down. I'm going to ignore those 3 things based on what the guys have just said. My tip would be, if you're considering a career break, it's probably an itch you are going to need to scratch at some stage. You might ignore it today, but if you're anything like me, and I suspect the other guys as well, it's something it's just in you. Some people can see out there the career. People like us, we've got that itch. And there'll come a point where you say, oh, you'll hit a blocker and you'll have a knot in your stomach and your head will feel heavy and you'll go, can't do it. At that particular moment in time, instead of letting that knock you back, just take a moment to push back against your natural reaction to that one thing. It might be money, it might be missing out on promotion, it might be people getting ahead of you, whatever it is, but just probe your own negative reaction to that a little bit more. And it's amazing how you will soon find ways to almost scramble your way over that particular barrier. And you'll come across other ones as well. But once you realize that you can achieve more than you think you're capable of, and actually it's not so much of a deterrent to you, you'll get to the stage where you feel way more confident. And that inner confidence in yourself will translate when you come back. You don't need to justify this. Some people will not accept what you have to say, but you don't need to justify your decision-making existence to anybody else. And if I could have said that to myself and made myself believe it at the age of 21, I'd have been a much more accomplished human being. I wasted too many years being insecure, and I wish I could have taken that on board. So just probe those barriers and overcome them, and you'll get your career break. And I'm pretty damn sure that you'll enjoy it, and you'll come back a much more rounded person.
Fabulous, thank you. So we have now reached 7:30, and I promised I would finish off at 7:30. Joe, Laura, Peter, thank you so much for your insight, your time, and all of the thoughts and insight you've given to your experiences. It really has made me want to take another career break. But I think everything that you've said has been just incredibly helpful. And I'm sorry to all of you listening that we've not been able to answer every single question, but I hope that you've been able to get enough of a flavour from what we've talked about, and that we've inspired you, at the very least, as Peter said, to challenge the barriers that you may put in front of you, but also to not feel the need to justify, to not be scared of doing something different from the norm, and to really believe in yourself and the value that you bring now, but the gains that you will also make from taking time out for yourself, for whatever your reasons and your motivation. But really do think seriously about it and weigh up, as Joe said, the risks. And it isn't something that everybody can do, but that's okay. It's about making informed decisions and controlling what it is that you can control. So thank you ever so much, everybody. Really appreciate your time, and I hope you found it an interesting session.
Yeah, just want to echo what Kay said. Thank you so much to our panelists. Thank you, everybody who took their time out this evening to take part and come and watch the event. And a reminder that these sessions are every month. Next month's session is going to be on going from employer to employee and your entrepreneurial startup. So if you're interested in that, please feel free to sign up. Apart from that, all that's left for me to say is a final thank you to all of our panelists. Thank you again for you all attending. Enjoy the rest of your evening, everybody. Good night and goodbye.